Welcome back to Close Up. If the dynamics of the Democratic primary for the 1st Congressional District are changing, nobody knows for sure, as there's little in the way of new polling to show what's happening. We're in a tunnel. We might not see where we're going until June. One of the candidates trying to break out into the light in CD1 is Christian Urrutia, and he's our guest this morning on Close Up. Christian, thanks for coming in.
Hey, Adam, thanks for having me here.
So you've won some key progressive endorsements lately, and that's going to be an important thing as this goes on. There seems to be a push underway among some progressives to say, hey, this is our guy. There are other candidates who support Medicare for all, other candidates who are big on green energy, other candidates with ambitious plans that are progressive. But what makes you the guy on that?
Yeah, so look, we just got the endorsement of the New Hampshire Progressive Caucus, the New Hampshire Youth Movement, 350 New Hampshire Action. Folks that are looking at my campaign, they see a bold vision to tackle what isn't working in Washington right now. You know, I'm an outsider. I came into this campaign, look, no one knew the Urrutia name, and that's okay. I certainly didn't know them. They've looked at the plan I have, the vision I have, and the fight that I have that I'm willing to bring to Washington, and they're saying Christian's our guy. But look, I think in this race, there are some really substantive differences. So let's talk about Maura and Stephanie and myself. I'm a Medicare for all candidate. They're not. Okay, I've laid out a vision for universal child care and a way to pay for it with a tax on the billionaire class. They haven't gone that. I've said we need a living wage in this country. I talk about that a lot. I think it's a complete failure of Washington. I've never heard them say the words living wage. I look at the situation in Israel and what's happening right now. I don't think our tax dollars should subsidize the Israeli military when we don't have universal health care in America and they have universal health care in Israel. And I don't think we should send bombs over to Israel to be used in the genocide in Gaza. They're not taking that position either. But it's not just about like the political positions. I could go on for a while about this. It's also the way we're funding our campaigns. Significant differences. It's the question probably I get the most on the campaign trail is actually where do you stand on campaign finance, the money you're willing to take. From the beginning of the campaign, I said no corporate PAC money, no APAC money, no APAC aligned money. We're never going to seek it and we're never going to accept it. The reality is, to different degrees, Maura and Stephanie have courted that money and have taken that money. Heck, Maura is endorsed by the Democratic majority for Israel, very aligned with AIPAC right now. And I look at that situation, I think it's corrosive to our democratic process in New Hampshire. You've been around for a while. You know what happens in these elections. These super PACs come in at the last moment and carpet bomb the state with negative ads that just slander candidates. And so I have a pledge and I have a challenge for all the candidates, frankly, similar to what Bernie just said over the last week. We should all reject super PACs from coming in. We should reject AIPAC from coming in. We should reject DMFI, Democratic Majority for Israel, from coming into this election. We should say, we don't want you involved in this election. We want the candidates to make their case to the voters of New Hampshire and the voters of New Hampshire to actually make an informed decision. I'm willing to take that pledge. Are Maura and Stephanie and the rest of the candidates? It's up to them. But I think our voters deserve better.
And you've been in the low single digits in polling. And again, we haven't seen any up-to-date polling in a while. But what do we have to see from you in the next poll? There's got to be like a distinct upward trajectory, right? What are you going to do if we don't see that?
Yeah, look, let's just take a stock of where we are, all right? The vast majority of the New Hampshire voters are looking for something else. Shaheen, look, I'll give it, she has the best name in politics in terms of being known, okay? And even with all that, even with her mother, who's been a senator for, what, 20 years now almost, and a governor before that, and involved in elections before that, even with that knowledge, they're looking for something else. Maura was the first candidate to jump in this race. She ran before, and I think we're like within the margin of error of each other. The fact is, people are looking for other candidates right now. They're starting to engage. The voters of New Hampshire kick the tires. You know that, certainly, right? I think it's going to take a little bit of time for everyone to engage, but we are exactly where we want to be at this stage. We have the vision to win and to take on what I think is a really broken Washington.
You mentioned, you know, calling the war in Gaza genocide. This is interesting. Things have evolved throughout this campaign. A lot has happened since last July. When you were here last July, I was just watching this interview back. I asked you to characterize what you thought the war in Gaza was, and you said, I'm not going to get into this question of characterizing it as genocide or not genocide.
Yeah.
What changed for you?
Well, I don't think anything's really changed, quite frankly. I've been clear on this campaign at a number of different times that there's a genocide in Gaza. What I care about the most, right, is what is America going to do about this? And if you go back to that question and that answer, that's what I really focused on. I don't think we should be facilitating what's happening in Gaza right now. I don't think that's appropriate for the United States. It's not appropriate in terms of my values. I think we need to focus on how do we bring stability to that region? How do we make sure that the people of Palestine can live with security and safety? How do we actually rebuild Gaza? No one's presented a credible argument for how we're going to do that. That's what I was actually focused on, and that is actually my focus right now. How do we actually bring stability to it? And you and I, we may disagree about whether it's a genocide or not. I think it is. But what we need to really focus on as Americans is how do we ensure there's stability in the region, and that means safety and security for the people of Gaza and for Palestine.
But it's not you and I disagreeing. You said one thing in July, or you wouldn't say it. You wouldn't say the word genocide in July.
I got to disagree with you, Adam. I didn't get into it.
This is your exact quote. I'm not going to get into this question of characterizing it as a genocide or not as a genocide. And now you're calling it a genocide. So something has changed.
Not that much actually has changed. What I didn't want to do is get into a protracted discussion like this one about whether there's a genocide or not, because I knew that would probably happen, frankly. The reality is, I think that there's a genocide. You can look at plenty of stuff I've put out there before, okay? I think that there's a need for the United States to actually have a foreign policy with values. I talked about that at length before as well. I talked about the fact that I don't think we should be supporting it. I think we need change. I've been unequivocal about that. So I just don't see that much of a difference.
The Supreme Court decision on voting rights. We see this kind of arms race now around the country in terms of redrawing congressional maps. Governor Ayotte has said here she doesn't want to do it, but everywhere else you're seeing everyone look to change maps to get the maximum partisan advantage out of this. Do you support this kind of change? And if not, what should be done about it?
Yeah, well, look, I think right now we do have the fact that I think gerrymandering is a real problem in this country. Congress has had an opportunity to make gerrymandering illegal, and they failed to do that, right? So it should be illegal across the board, but it cannot be that the Republicans get to gerrymander and the Democrats can't gerrymander, and then the deck is so stacked against the voters of New Hampshire or the voters of this country that are clearly saying they want something different. So look, at the end of the day, we need to get past this as a country at some point, but what we cannot have is the Republicans gerrymandering Texas and the Democrats sitting on their hands. What we need to do is actually fight a lot harder in Washington, fight a lot harder in New Hampshire to ensure that the people's vote and the will of the people are properly represented.
Would you want, if there is a Democratic trifecta in the near future at the State House in Concord, would you want them to redraw a map more positively for Democrats?
I think they should draw a map that's fair to the voters of New Hampshire.
On the energy front, this is another state issue we're seeing. Would you be supportive of the idea of a small modular nuclear reactor if you're the congressman in District 1 in your district?
I'm in strong favor of clean energy sources. I'm not sure nuclear is the way we should go, frankly. We should be investing, I'm not sure, I know nuclear is not the way we should go. We should be investing in solar. We should be investing in wind. This administration has made it a lot harder for those projects to go forward. China is eating our lunch when it comes to battery technology, solar technology, and other renewable energy sources. We need to be focusing on that. We can't go back to fossil fuels or other sources of energy that prove to be potentially dangerous, and I think nuclear is in that category.
You have said, quote, green energy will make your life cheaper. When? Because that hasn't always been the case necessarily state by state.
Yeah, well, I think it's partly because we keep on having impediments to the development of it from the Trump administration, right? Look, there's a reason why countries around the world are investing in green energy sources. They see that it creates stability. It actually creates a better energy sources that are cleaner. And it also would mean, in the long run, we have to stop being involved in the Middle East. You know, I'm sick of these endless wars. I would vote against funding the war in Iran. I am sick of sending the best that America has to offer to go fight these wars. We need to focus on things at home, and part of it is energy independence that's clean. Is America now on the hook, though, in Iran, essentially to maintain a military vigilance based on what's already transpired, just to stop them from having a nuclear weapon? No, I don't think so. Look, I think that there are diplomatic solutions that are possible. We had the Iran deal in 2016, right? That they basically had no enriched uranium at that stage. Okay, so the reality is we've seen that diplomatic solutions can work at them. I think what we should do is make sure that we don't get stuck in a quagmire, which is where I think this administration has taken us. We're now blockading a blockade to stop a blockade. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. What we need to do is have less of a footprint in the Middle East. We need to be focused here on home. We need to be focused on human rights and values across the world in rebuilding our alliances with Europe and with Eastern Asia that share our values. I think that's where we should be focusing.
All right, Christian Urrutia, thanks for coming in and joining us on Close-Up, and we're interested to see how this goes in the months ahead. Appreciate your time.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, we'll be right back with Hillary Clinton leaning in on the issue of the Epstein files during a recent visit to Nashua. Stay with us.